All right, well, good morning. I'm Joel Fisher. I'm the administrator here at Wellspring Christian Family Schools, WCFS for short. And we're going to have a little panel now to talk a little bit about what exactly is WCFS. What do we do, and how's this connected to what Gary's been talking about? So real quickly, real brief introductions. You've already met Gary, but he is our superintendent and founder. Sitting here next to Gary is Susie Davis, and she's actually administrator for one of our affiliate programs, one of what we now call HELP programs, but Westminster Christian Family Schools right here in Maryland. So she's one of our local affiliates, so we're glad to have her with us today. And then this is Becky Wyan, that's sitting next to me, and Becky is a lifelong educator. She had already had a long and fruitful career in education by the time she came onto WCFS staff. How many years ago, Becky?
32.
32 years ago. So Becky's had two careers and still going strong. So we're delighted to have Becky here. So the next couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about a number of things. We're going to start with Becky. First question for you is basically, how is WCFS different than a standard Christian school or school program as far as structure and curriculum and those sorts of things?
Well, let me think. First of all, with Walkersville, we operate under this philosophy of championship Christian education. And that in itself, if we could ever come to understand it, and we're always growing in understanding it, is what makes us different. Christian education with Walkersville is individualized. That means each student is seen and evaluated and trained within the framework of God's creation for that student, and that is valuable.
I'm just going to jump in. You might hear us interchangeably use the term Walkersville and Wellspring and
so
WCFS,
sorry.
And that's because we've just been in the process of going through a name change. We originally founded as Walkersville. That's why you'll see it on our sign and so on. So don't get tripped up there. It's all the same thing.
I'm totally guilty. It's part of the action of an old brain. And well, anyway, I want to just share for a moment what championship Christian education is, because it will really electrify your opportunity in education. First of all, everyone has a philosophy of education. I didn't even know that when I began. I thought, well, I don't have a philosophy of education. You just go to school. And that is not true. Everyone has a philosophy of education. For those of us who are believers, we have the opportunity to believe that God governs education and reveals that governing to us through His Word. And so that gives us a powerful foundation. It gives us a sure, incorruptible foundation. It isn't something that a psychologist or a better educated person can come along and corrupt or dismantle or pull out from under us and render it ineffective. It is always solid. Championship Christian education assumes that each child will be individually moving toward excellence in every field that he is introduced to. Now, there is a point of bunny trail here. God has gifted each of us. In championship Christian education, unlike most other education philosophies, the student will be given opportunity to practice and continue to grow and even to be pushed in the area of the giftedness. In the area where there doesn't appear to be much giftedness, the training will go toward survival. For example, if a child doesn't want to ever know a thing about numbers, enough about numbers will be taught to him anyway with no giftedness, just simply so that he can be a joyful participant in his community and not be cheated at the bank. Then another point of championship Christian education is the whole understanding of the value of your Redeemer's work. so that at every point the cross becomes a very powerful tool. Now, let me just give a tiny bit of illustration. You see, you know the purpose of the Redeemer. You know who he is. You know that we know him personally. And you know that because of that, we will live eternally with him. But then there is the everyday power that knowing the cross, having the cross, and being a part of the family of the cross will give us. And that everyday part is, what if I make a mistake? What if I go beyond making a mistake and deliberately sin? What if I say to my mother teacher, I'm not going to do that work? At that point, that mother teacher can offer to that student the holy blessing of life redeemed and an opportunity to move out of this failure proneness into success, because the Redeemer has given you that opportunity at the cross. So it's a beautiful part of the philosophy of Championship Christian Education. Now, I could go on for another 30 or 40 years talking about Championship Education. Do you want me to stop at this point?
Probably not.
And
30
yes,
or 40
it is
years.
Wellspring.
Becky, you are our one of our academic advisors, especially for elementary moms and students. You have what I think you have summed up as the 5-finger curriculum.
Oh,
tell us a little bit about that, and
you know, I don't remember that, but I can tell you that the point that he is making is that when you are dealing with a young child, it is extremely important to think in terms of real learning. And we just have so much trouble doing that. We are so excited to find a better workbook for this year than we had for last year. We are so excited to find the perfect text to read together with our child in history. Elementary students are best served if they learn to think and if they learn to research. And those skills come to us if we have opportunity to dream, opportunity for free time to look up things, opportunity to build and watch it collapse and think, how might I build that the next time better? And so this is the essence behind what Joel is talking about. With that in mind, we think in terms of read aloud, always reading information to the child that the child can't read to himself. Always reading information to the child that challenges the child to examine his own heart. Always reading to the child something that will motivate him to care for his own country more than he does, to understand who Jesus is better than he does. Reading aloud to the child. Thinking of that as one of these fingers. Another is the learning to read, and that learning to read has other kinds of components to it, but the one that we put here is the writing and the spelling. And the learning to read is exciting because it is in that lower elementary level that phonics can become real, where if the child has a problem with phonics, we can examine a gazillion other ways that the child might learn to read so that he could still enjoy the printed page. But it also goes a little bit farther. Remember, we're talking about research skills and thinking skills. So by the time we get a little bit higher in elementary, we want to think in terms of how that child can spell and write and what is the purpose of writing. And so we never want to lose sight of the fact that when we come together to teach our children, say phonics, or say the evaluation of literature, or say how to write the perfect paragraph, any of those particulars that we're teaching, we want at the same time the child is learning that, for the child to learn better how to know Jesus. And we want also for the child to notice that he worshiped. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by seeing the wonder of the language and by realizing we didn't just put this all together for ourselves, but God did it for all of humanity. And so that is a third part. Then the fourth part is learning how to deal with numbers in one way or another, but with the very young children, using objects and making it absolutely real at a brain level, not only at a rote level. Now, it doesn't mean you don't do rote. It's fun to go marching around the house counting your steps, or to bounce the ball, how many times you can bounce it, or whatever, and that's very rote learning to count. And so that is a good activity too. And then the fifth thing that we think of is in terms of the general education of all of those other subjects that come together through the read aloud, through the learning to read, through the learning to write, and through the mathematics. But foundation to all of that is, why am I doing this? I am doing this so that how God has created me can be best fulfilled. I am going to march forward in my education and in my life to serve the living Master, and that is the goal. I'm sure my answers are longer than you have.
No, those are great. Those are great answers, Becky. Now, just as a little bit of an introduction, we're going to talk about this a little more as we go on. But in case you hadn't caught it now, we are a home-based program, because we're partnering with parents. That's why we're actually called Wellspring Christian Family Schools, with an S on the end of school, because even though we have a physical location, an office, and even a classroom for occasional classes that we might supplement, the real work is going on in each family's home. And I guess, Becky, just to kind of finish talking about what you're saying as far as your role, tell us a little bit about how you practically interact with parents as part of the WCFS program.
Well, for parents who choose to be enrolled with us.
I think is your mic still on? There we go.
For parents who are wanting to be enrolled, there first is an application, right, process. And then after that, I'm willing to meet individually with the students, and I do a testing. We have a really fun time with the testing. In that testing time, I try to find out what really motivates that child, what is the learning style of that child, and how much academic burnout does the child already have. That's if he's 5 or 6 years old or older, not usually younger. And then we try to, and I try to lay a foundation of what it means to be in a Christian school, and what it means to dedicate yourself to excellent learning under a good teacher, your own mother. And we talk about that some with a question and answer kind of format. But then after that, I meet with the mom, or the mom and the dad, and talk about what kinds of materials and which notebooks and what kind of pencil and how many colors and whatever would be best for that child to learn at maximum opportunity. And so what we do is we try to individualize what the child needs, what the child loves, how God has made the child, and put all that together to have an approved program by the state.
All right, very good. Gary, I'm going to pull you in real quick here, just a little bit of, we've got a few minutes here before we turn the corner to our next segment, but can you give us just a nutshell? Basically, WCFS has been around for 35 plus years. How did it come about? How does that basically mesh with the history of homeschooling in Maryland?
Right, okay, well, I think the first thing I want to do is answer the question about the school. Maryland law has provided for churches to offer what they call educational programs, but you have to be a bona fide church. In other words, you have to be a real church organization. And then the organization can offer a bona fide educational program, and that educational program satisfies the actual requirements for compulsory education. Maryland law basically says you must attend public school or receive regular thorough instruction in the same subjects taught at public schools. So all private schools fall under that umbrella. When we started homeschooling our own children, I'd been teaching in a Christian school for 10 years, and I recognized that it was going to be best for the interests of my children to homeschool. So we organized the school program as a regular Christian school, looking to the home as being the classroom and the mom and dad being the teacher. And so we created that kind of a legal structure. Of course, Maryland Board of Education did not want to allow that to happen, so they told us, no, you can't do that. And I felt like the law said plainly that we could do it, so we did it. I figured you go ahead and do what you can do, and then you can fight about the details down the road, but at least we're doing it. So when we got down the road, what happened was our system of education that we established became the template by which all of homeschooling, if you're homeschooling in Maryland, you're using the Walkersville program to some effect. I mean, obviously much diluted in terms of the basic requirements. So education in the public school arena, in the homeschool arena, the Board of Education wants it to be evidenced that regular thorough instruction is taking place. But beyond that, in our high school program, we also award diplomas for students so they can accumulate credits and transcripts in a normal way, and Maryland law affects that as well. So the way our program is organized, we recognize that the possibility exists that a student may wish to go to college at the end, but our transcripts are required by law to reflect what the law says. There's customary methods of recording transcripts for students. So what we do in that process is we validate the course content. There's a terrible little word called NCAA.
which we'll get to in a little while.
Okay, good. But we try to have our courses reflect, the law says customary, which means the majority of post-secondary institutions are expecting to receive transcript and communications in a certain way, and the majority of those, that's what you have to satisfy. So we sort of use the NCAA as the umbrella for what the majority is, and that's how we function.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those requirements. It's probably helpful at the moment. Also, if you look at the banners we've got on both sides of the podium here, these are just little summaries of some of the things that go along with the program. It also is probably helpful for our audience to know that we do have two distinct programs underneath WCFS. We have our WCFS Academy, which is what Gary was just describing, where we maintain customary transcripts and records for basically a track to receiving a diploma that's recognized. WCFS diplomas have been recognized nationwide, internationally as well. We have good relationships with the College Board as well as entities like the NCAA and in the Department of Defense. So that's that program. And then we also do have a what we call the WCFS review, which basically just strictly meets the requirement for Maryland law that you have oversight of your homeschool program. If you're not going through the county, you're going through what Gary talked about, a bona fide church program or a private school. So that's called our review. We don't basically do the records to the degree that you would in the academy. You're not going to get a diploma through that program, but you will satisfy Maryland law. So those are our two programs. We also have a distance program. So families who would like to use Academy, the Academy program, but don't live in the state of Maryland, you can enroll that way as well. We have a number of families who have used that over the years and are currently using it. So that's, and then even actually locally, we have families who in the region will use either the distance program or will still use just a straight up Academy program, depending on where you live. there's a possibility, if you live in a state like West Virginia or Pennsylvania, that you can actually use our program to satisfy what you need to satisfy that way as well, though the circumstances vary from case to case. So with that, we're going to wrap up, and now we're going to turn to our next segment, but I guess we're going to stop so we can get the next link up. So feel free to stand up.